All right, it is 7 o'clock, and I would like to call the regular meeting of City Council for June the 27th to order. Guess I better hit the gavel, otherwise it's not official. Welcome, everybody, to the meeting tonight. I see we have at least 7 staff attending the meeting tonight. Well, 8, 9 actually in total. Welcome, everyone. And without further ado, I would like to recognize that we're having this meeting on the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples and ask Maurice if we have any late items.
There's no late items, Mr. Mayor.
All right, hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt the agenda, please? Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Kiddo seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Next up, we have adoption of the regular minutes of council held on June the 13th. Councillor Dallin moves. Councillor Roberts seconds. All those in favor? That motion is also carried. Okay, first up with official business tonight is the proposed zoning amendment bylaw 2722, which is being called the Housing Availability and Affordability Bylaw. Good. So the resolution's on the floor. Before I ask for somebody to move it, we'll describe what that is. It's approval of first reading, and that council directs staff to undertake a public engagement process. In other words, get the feelings of the public, as we do with all of these bylaws. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor McBain, thank you, and Councillor Oakley seconds. Let me just check and make sure that there were only the two. Yes. All right. Discussion. Pardon me, Troy or Justin, did you want to start out with some comments and then we'll move to questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a few slides to share just as a bit of an overview on the proposed changes. And then probably take 5 minutes or so, and then we'll allow for, or obviously if there's any questions from council, we're prepared to help with those. And
excellent.
I'll have Justin present the overview, sorry.
Take it away, Justin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for having me this evening. So the zoning bylaw amendment that we are proposing to help 27. And I'll have Justin present the overview, sorry. Oh, take it away, Justin. Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you for having me this evening. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Oh, I think we're good to go now. I think somebody had called in, so it's going to.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So the the proposed zoning bylaw amendment number 2722 to the Kimberley zoning bylaw 1850 is indeed for housing availability and affordability. And so I'm going to give a brief presentation here. I'm going to run through the zones and some of the changes pretty quickly, but we have some time to answer any questions that you do have. So feel free to jot down any notes as we go. So the context of the amendments stemmed from the official plan originally, and there is a lot of direction in policy of the official plan looking towards allowing for an increased level of housing units throughout the city. And we did follow up with the housing needs assessment that also shows a growing need for different types of housing and increased housing generally within the city, so smaller units especially. And stemming from a recent report that was brought to council, the Building Height and Density Report, there was also a motion put forward by council to bring forward some new policy to address some of the affordability and availability of housing needs in the city. And this all follows some global planning policy direction where many jurisdictions from the local municipal level all the way up to the federal level in across North America and the world are looking towards a lot of infill solutions to help get housing online to address growing affordability and availability concerns. So I'm going to go through each of the zones now, and starting with the commercial zones. We are proposing to allow for an increase of height and an increase of floor space ratio. And just so that everyone is on the same page of what floor space ratio is, there's a little chart here that shows for a floor space ratio of 1, it means that you can cover the entire lot with one building, or half of a lot with a two-story building. If you go up to an FSR of 2.0, then you would be able to cover an entire lot with a two-story building or half of a lot with four-story building, etc. Now, these allowances for increased floor space ratio are with affordable housing agreements that we've structured in several of the sections, and those would be agreements that we have in place to ensure that some of that housing is made available with either subsidized or some other type of mechanism to ensure that they are affordable, which generally is understood as costing no more than 30% of the renter's or resident's income. We've also included a step back requirement, and this is across a few zones as well, but in the commercial zone, we're looking at elevations abutting a highway where there's a step back requirement from 12 meters going back all the way up to the maximum allowable height, and that cuts out at a 45-degree angle. So in the existing setback and height requirements, a building can be built right to property line at the maximum allowable height. Whereas with the step back requirement, once it hits that step back requirement height at the property line, it needs to be set back at a 45-degree angle up until it hits that maximum allowable height. Moving on to the R3 zone, we are proposing the removal of maximum dwelling units, so allowing for a larger amount of units on a given property, and up to 15 meters in height, or a floor space ratio of 4.0, where affordable housing agreement is signed. And additionally, some reductions in the required setbacks, and an increase in the site coverage allowances. Under the R1 zone, we're looking at moving that from only allowing a single unit primary dwelling to allowing single and duplex primary dwellings with an accessory dwelling. And then some modifications to allow for smaller setbacks and some increase to site coverage, just to allow some more flexibility in architectural and siting designs on a given site. R2 zone, we are proposing to shift that to allow up to 6 dwelling units per parcel, and up to 2 accessory dwelling units per parcel by right, and then up to 10 units with an affordable housing agreement signed. We're also proposing to decrease the minimum lot size and allow for increase in height and site coverage and floor space ratio, well, the introduction of floor space ratio, as well as increases to that with increases in the number of units provided on a given site. Likewise, in the R2 and R3 zone, we're proposing to have the step back requirement as well, just to ensure that the massing is not overwhelming for neighboring lots. So again, having that 45-degree angle requirement once it hits a certain height based on the setback from property line. I prepared a few examples of what different massings in the R2 zone look like, just to provide council with a bit of a better understanding of what different scenarios might emerge. So under the current R2 zoning, which is shown on the two models to the left here, there's basically by right allowed to develop these types of boxes. Whereas when we move into the proposed zoning, there is, you can see some of the step back requirements in the corners there, and some of the site coverage requirements that happen when different types of units are proposed and different types of unit mixes are proposed, all the way up to a 4 or more unit building that would be maximized on its height and its floor space ratio, as well as site coverage. And then finally, we are proposing some amendments to the general regulations. So first off, the landscaping, we are proposing to incorporate landscaping requirements, which we otherwise do not have currently in the city. The retaining wall requirements, which we do have in the Alpine zoning area, but we want to see that reflected in the Kimberley zoning area, as we have run into some issues with that in the past. The requirement for amenity space for multiple unit dwellings in the R2 and the R3 zones to make sure that they are livable for occupants. Some permitted in all zones allowances, and the new one here is for home-based businesses, so a third classification of those, which is a new classification, which allows for businesses that don't have clients coming and going from the site are not disruptive in that way to the site, as well as some lighting requirements. The visibility at the intersection requirements are changes to the existing that are meant to help with some of the changes that we're proposing to fencing. So ensuring pedestrian safety at intersections. And then some general clarification on the modernization of language. So bringing up the language, things like using family, which is a very difficult thing to define in a planning perspective, and shifting that over to single and duplex units rather than single family and two family units. And then likewise, just some clarification of language around density subdivision, development permits, etc. And under the parking requirements, we are looking at reducing that to 1 per dwelling unit, except where there's a bed and breakfast, but there's an additional parking space requirement still. And some parking locations, so having a setback where there is an enclosed parking area, and again for pedestrian safety, and then some enhancements to the bicycle parking language and requirements to help strengthen the outcomes of those parking areas and make sure that they're suitable and usable by residents at the end of the day and help encourage active transportation. And maybe I'll just end with, we do have, as part of this, the second resolution here to engage the community, which is going above and beyond the statutory requirements. So we're really looking to do that for second reading, which we'd be looking to bring forward, hopefully during the next council meeting, pending what feedback we do get from residents and council. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Awesome. That is a mouthful, Justin. There was an awful lot of work that has gone into this, a lot of moving parts, and we really appreciate the effort that you put into it. Councillor Kiddo.
I see notice in there about an affordable housing agreement. Are you able to define for us what affordable housing really means now and what an agreement might look like?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that, and Justin can help out as well if there's further clarification. What we're aiming for there is with the changes in the rules to allow for some additional density, additional units, additional height in some cases. But if a proponent is going to take advantage of those extra allowances, then there's a requirement that a certain amount of the housing is designated as affordable housing. And that can be, as Justin mentioned earlier, tied to the household income levels. But it can also just be by defining rental rates by compared to current market rates and having certain units dedicated for near or below market rental rates as well. So I think it's going to depend a little bit on the context and part of that development review process there. There's also going to be further information presented a little bit later on kind of how that housing agreement process will work. But we wanted to make sure that we propose something in with these regulation changes now to kind of set the foundation for that.
Further?
Probably just some general comments. I'd say good luck with that. That's just coming up with a definition is going to be very, very difficult, I think, and holding the developers' feet to the fire is going to be very, very difficult. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up in the bylaw there. I didn't think I'd see this kind of stuff coming in Kimberley so soon. This is my experience, what we've seen in the cities probably 20 years ago as the inner suburbs started becoming popular places to live and some of the family homes turned into larger homes. I think this is some great work. I think it's going to make a big difference on variances and development permits and stuff. Hopefully it makes planning's life a lot easier, but I'm very doubtful it will have any impact on affordable housing whatsoever. I think the only way to really address the affordable housing issue is to really call it what we really need at the moment, which is social housing. But this is still a very useful tool as Kimberley grows, and we need to use our space a little bit more effectively. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Kiddo. Councillor Oakley.
Thanks, you guys, for an excellent report. I really enjoyed going through this. I do have a couple of questions for you, Justin. The R1 proposal to go with higher density per lot, for example. My question is, feedback that we would receive potentially on something like that would be negative, and people would be worried about their property values. I always hear about the decline potentially of property values. And I'm just wondering, there must be a lot of data all around the world, I'm assuming, showing that property values do not decline when you are creating higher density. And I'm just wondering, are you coming across that information?
Yeah, yes. So, thank you, Councilor Lee. Yes, that's correct. The prevailing data that shows that in virtually no circumstance, and none that I've come across in any of my research, do property values ever become negatively affected by a zoning increase to density. And quite often and the data seems to bear out that it's the opposite, that whenever there is an increase of allowable density within a zoning bylaw, there is a property value uplift. Yes.
Yep. Further. All right, I've got a couple of comments and then a couple of questions as well, guys. So, I mean, the goal, as we said about doing this, and Councillor Kiddo hit on this, that is to encourage through the higher density, more units, but also fewer variances so that we can kind of get from, start to actually having housing a little bit quicker. I'm not sure these days that you can have a high enough sense of urgency on getting that inventory out there. I do the affordable housing piece, that having an income test, that is just not going to fly. You're talking about social housing when you talk about income tests, very similar to what the seniors project has done up on Church Street. When you've got private sector developers coming in, who's going to do the means test? Who's going to administer that? How is that going to be done? I think that's fraught with all kinds of difficulties. However, having something that designates a certain number of units at a percent of what, say, the highest rent in the complex is, or middle rent, or whatever it is, but there needs to be a relationship there between what is market rent and what we are defining as affordable in this particular case. And I think if you did that and the number of units was reasonable, in other words, not going to remove all of the profit from the development, I think that could work. And in fact, we've had a couple of the developers in town with the proposals they've been putting forward that have proposed exactly that, where a number of units, whatever the percent is, or the number of units in a complex actually have reduced rates. So I think something like that can work, but I think it's important that we don't confuse this with social housing. I think if we do that, we will have some difficulty. Now, a couple of specific questions, clarifications, I guess. I had sent an email on this earlier, so I'm assuming you guys have seen that. So compact growth and compact development, are we referring to higher density? Is that, because I didn't see a definition of what compact development was.
Yeah, it's a couple things. It can be, more density in a number of ways. It can be a combination of smaller lots, more units on individual lots, but basically allowing for more housing, more development within a more compact footprint, if you will. So using less land, requiring less infrastructure, less transportation costs is all part of that picture.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, in the report, it made reference to zoning bylaw 1850 area of effect. I assume that's the catchment area, however it's defined for this bylaw. What is that?
Yeah, the zoning bylaw 1850 applies to the whole city except for the lands near the resort that are part of the Alpine Resort bylaw 2016. But more specifically, this bylaw, the amendments here, the general amendments of the parking regulations will apply, throughout the community, except for those impacted by the Alpine Resort bylaw. And then again, specifically the R1, R2, R3, C1, and CP1 zones are specifically impacted by the proposed changes.
Right, okay. Thank you for that.
And just a little further, sorry, Mr. Mayor, a little further clarification is, even just looking at the R1, R2 zones and the C1 zone, that's, you know, the majority of the, you know, of the community outside of the resort area lands. That, you know, R2 is our biggest zone and applies to most residential neighborhoods. And R1 is another fairly big zone, but, and the C1 is most of our commercial lots, in and around the main commercial nodes.
Right.
Yep.
So I think about 82%, I think from the census, it said 82% of the housing in Kimberley is single-family housing. And if you took out all of the condo developments up in the Alpine area and looked into, you know, the town proper, that percentage is way higher than 82%. So our ability to, you know, densify here, I mean, it's, the sky would be the limit, you know, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Now,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
comment on that, Mr. Mayor. I think too, even in some of those existing neighborhoods, there is quite a bit of, you know, moderately dense housing forms, townhouses, apartment houses that were all, you know, kind of 70s to 80s time period. And then really since this current zoning bylaw came in 1994, there wasn't a lot of new housing like that in those neighborhoods. So that's part of what this bylaw will do, is it will allow for, you know, other forms mixed in, certainly not preventing single unit dwellings in those zones, but it certainly opens up the options to allow for secondary units or other forms, types and sizes of housing throughout the community.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that, Troy. So there was mention in one spot here that the agreement to be put in place, that at least 25% of the units be designated as affordable. A little further down the report, it referenced 40%. Was that just a typo?
That was, yes, Mr. Mayor. It is intended to be 25% in the R
Okay, cool.
zone, that is what was referenced there.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. You've already talked about the ratios. Yeah, so I think that's it. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make a comment as a banker. The word affordable is thrown around as social housing or as can you afford it next to your neighbor. But the bottom line is that affordability a lot of times depends on where you came from and whether or not you just sold your house for $2 million. And guess what? You can afford a whole lot more than the person that's just working at a run around the block type job. Banks, when they need to give mortgage, have a formulaic opportunity to decide whether or not you can afford to make your mortgage payment. But for people who have cash, who come in, everything's affordable, and little rental and a whole bunch or a big one. And so when we talk about affordable, it's sort of, you have to be careful of which group you're speaking about. If you're talking about the two young people that just got married and have two incomes and barely can pay their utility bills, then maybe that's not affordable for them. But for the person that just moved from Ontario and sold everything to come here and can afford two of those. So we have to kind of couch that affordability aspect as to even the regular ordinary people, not just social housing. And I think when you look at affordability, the intention is to try to make some of them a smaller footprint so they become more affordable for the average young person who presently is feeling pretty darn hopeless about ever being able to achieve a home.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Goodwin.
Yes, thanks guys for putting all this together. It's very comprehensive, very wide reaching. And because it is, a lot of people are going to see it as affecting their interests. So I'm just thinking about the public feedback phase and how long you think that should last and how we can get people to actually have a look at this and think about it and give us the feedback before we actually pass the bylaw and then get mad at us because we did. So there's a lot to absorb and a lot of reach to this thing. What do you think? Yes,
that's absolutely correct and very astute. It will absolutely require a good level of public engagement, which is why we're proposing to do this extra phase of public engagement over the next month or so to ensure that we're getting out and reaching people. Part of that engagement that we're talking about is both using the new Engage Kimberley website to really put that to use and to garner some feedback from people, and also trying to get out to the community and meet people where they're at, because we do know that as part of any of these exercises, if you only have online, that's only going to catch a certain segment of the population. And quite often people are just plain down too busy to get out and give us their feedback directly. So, or where we're asking them to, and instead of trying to get to where they're at. So we're looking at opportunities to either get out into the Platzl or other public spaces in town to talk to folks where they're at.
Sounds good.
All right, seeing no further questions, we will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the work on that. But buckle up. There's still a lot to get done. Okay, next up we have the development permit for Fernie Street Phase 1, and it is that council approve the development permit to allow for the Phase 1 development of 9 townhome units with the conditions as outlined in the report. Mover, please. Councillor Oakley, thank you, and Councillor McBain seconds. Any further discussion on this one, Troy?
If council would like, we're prepared to provide a brief overview, but if you feel the report is sufficient, then I think the recommendation is pretty clear, but we're happy to do an overview if you wish.
Council, any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Oakley.
Good. Just one question, you guys. I just was the feedback I've received so far on the possibility of this development by several groups of people would be the traffic. So given that infrastructure is renewed, in that area in terms of roads, is there any red flags with any of that?
No. So during this did receive a rezoning approval back in, I believe it was January. Sorry, off the top of my head here. And during that rezoning approval process, there was a review of the traffic impact that would occur to the streets in town site generally. And we did have confirmation from, and we have had continued support from our operations team that the traffic would not cause an unnecessary risk to the neighborhood.
Okay, thanks. I think I just keep, it's one of those things that just doesn't want to go away, and we'll just keep moving forward with this. So I just thought I'd ask again.
If I may add to that, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Troy.
This is phase 1 of a 2-phase project. It's 9 units at this point. It'll probably take a year or two for things to kind of build out and have occupants in there. And then there's a second phase to come later through separate development review. But I think just that my point is more about that kind of extended time frame to see this fruition. In my view, the traffic impact will be hardly noticeable for these units.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that as well. That's the common concern that's raised for me as a town site resident from my neighbours is the single entry into town site. I believe we do have a second egress from town site, but could you remind us of that, Troy?
Yes, I can. I believe Chief Prasad is in the audience there as well. I might want to add to that, but there is a defined secondary egress route through the lower mine yard from Tadanak Boulevard through the mine gate and down, winding its way through the lower mine yard to Jerry Sorensen Way.
Yeah, but I just don't think that one's very well advertised. Maybe on our website or under emergency preparedness, it'd be a good one to put down there. I just don't think that's very well known from town site residents that there is a second egress if needed. Thanks.
I believe Fire Chief has some signs ready to go to install to mark that.
Comment, Chief?
Yes, we have Victoria signs and location that they're gonna go.
Sorry, this microphone.
Oh, sorry. There we go. We do have an inventory of signs directing people as to primary and secondary routes up there. I think we're just trying to figure out whether they can go on existing poles or if we have to add new stands for them, but hope to have them up soon.
Councillor McBain.
Yeah, that's, I think that's really important, getting the auxiliary egress signs up and letting people know where that is. But as I've said in the past, as a kid who grew up in Town Site, and I hear, you know, traffic concerns as well. My folks still live up there. But I just want to remind people that we did have a working mine up there that had shift changes 2-3 times a day. You know, with 50, 60 cars going up and down there all pretty much at one time. And things functioned quite well. So just keep it in perspective. That's all. We're talking about 9 units here, and with you know, maybe double that after. Just keep it in perspective, folks.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor McBain. Councillor Roberts.
Another comment similar to that. I walk that area almost 5 times a week, and I go all the way up 8th Avenue, all the way down 6th Avenue, and I go up to the top. I can walk 500 block, 600 block, 700 block, 800 block, right to the very top of Fernie Street, and I maybe pass 2 cars. Doesn't matter what time of day I go. There's nobody home up there, folks. Even the people that are there, it's so spread out that traffic is not an issue. I can see where if we have a fire emergency or somebody or something, somebody might want to know how do we get out of town. But right now, in a day-to-day basis, it's a moot point.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Roberts. I think, as Councillor Oakley had said, whenever there is a development of any kind, even a single-family home going into a neighborhood, traffic comes up and so does snow removal. Those are the 2 biggies. And I would just like to remind everybody that our planning department, they don't do this off the corner of their desk. Traffic impact studies are an important part of all of the developments that we do around the city. We consult, depending on exactly what the development is, we consult with the Ministry of Transportation, with ICBC, with external consultants, and then we have our own internal operations people. It's a thorough analysis of whether this is, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think at the end of the day, we need to let our planning staff just do their jobs. They do it very, very well. And that includes the operations folks with the snow removal. If something changes, the operations folks change the procedure. Just because something was always done one way doesn't mean it will always be done that way. If there's a reason to change, they change. And that is another thing that's always taken into account, particularly in places like Town Site, because the volume of snow that definitely, you know, happens up both there and in the Alpine area. So I think our guys do a great job. We need to trust their judgment. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Next up, we have another development variance permit and development permit, this one for 302nd Ave, which is at least the 3rd incarnation of a development that has been attempted to be put down into this area in a while. And it is really, really good to see this current incarnation, which is a rental, phase 1 of a rental development going into the property. It's, I think, assuming we can get construction permits in place sooner than later, I think it'll be the very first of the sizable rental developments that we have in the queue here in Kimberley. So without further ado, I'll let Troy kind of explain what we're talking about here. The motion on the floor is that council instruct the corporate officer to issue notice to neighbors of 500 302nd Avenue of the intent to vary the zoning bylaw as shown in the report. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Kiddo moves and Councillor Dallum seconds. Okay, discussion. Kind of excited about this one, Troy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As are we. I'm going to have Ariane provide an overview of this project and the proposed variances. I'm not sure that council's had an opportunity to meet Ariane yet. She's coming up on her first year of excellent work here with us, and so happy to have her joining us today. So I'll let Ariane Scott Iverson take over.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Thanks, Ariane. Welcome.
Thank you. Proposed development variance permit 2022-004 requests a variance to zoning bylaw 1850 to reduce the side yard setback for a 10-unit apartment building from 6 meters to 2 meters and to allow the eaves of that building to project as close as 1.4 meters to the property line at a property located at 500 302nd Avenue. The variance is part of a larger residential development proposal for the site that includes a mix of 66 units within townhouses with basement suites, and apartment buildings. There are some constraints to the site, particularly along the steep slope at the southern embankment, that has influenced the site layout to some degree. Despite these constraints, the proposal meets most zoning requirements, with the exception of the apartment building within the side yard setback area adjacent to 305th Street. This is highlighted on page 3 of the report for reference. And as you can see from that page as well, the proposed relaxation would apply to a small portion of the building, with the rest of the structure being set back 3.8 meters from 305th Street. Decreasing the setback should have minimal adverse impacts on adjacent properties, given that the 305th Street right-of-way provides a 20-meter separation between the subject property and the nearest adjacent properties. Also, by incorporating architectural details that break up flat surfaces and add visual interest, enhance the building's overall design. Should council follow the recommendation to issue notice to adjacent properties, the development variance permit and the development permit would be brought back to a future council meeting for consideration and decision of the overall development concept. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that. By way of description, just so council and anybody watching the meeting tonight, this is the property that is located just south, I guess it is, of the Purcell Golf, the old Kimberley Golf Club. The last proposal that was in place was a possibility that phase 1 of the international school would be built on this property. And prior to that, there was a proposal for an aging in place facility, or numbers of facilities to be built down there. For various reasons, the previous 2 have not flown. My guess is there might have been 1 or 2 before that, Troy, but this is one that is moving along. I've talked to the developers a number of times, and they're anxious to get going on this. So I think third time will be a charm. Councillor Dallin.
Thank you. So I have no issue with that setback change. I see at the corner, there's plenty of line of sight ability, so that won't impact traffic in any way. My question, because I'm not entirely sure, units A do not have in-building parking, is that correct? And then further, B and C units do have in-building parking. Just asking for clarification.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Dellum. You're correct. The parking is located in the building types B and C. And then there's additional on-site surface parking, but there's no parking within the A-type buildings. Although some of the parking that is in the B-type buildings is there for some of the units in the A buildings.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Further council. Seeing no further questions, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And one more development variance permit, this for 303rd Street, which is the light industrial area to the rear of the Marysville Industrial Park. And the motion on the floor is that council instruct the corporate officer to issue notice to neighbors to allow for the construction of a 12-unit light industrial area. This actually, if I remember correctly, may have come before council previously in a different incarnation. It's really good to see this is back. I know a number of folks that I've talked to, they probably could have rented these 12 units out at least twice over by now had they had these in place a year or 2 ago. So Troy, take it away.
Thank you again. Once more.
Did we get a mover? Did we get a mover and a seconder? No. Okay, so sorry, Troy, to interrupt. A mover, Councillor Dallum, and seconded Councillor Kittle. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna say, I'm gonna hand this over once more to Justin. He is the one that worked mostly on this project here. Sure.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so this is a new development variance permit, but this was issued a development variance permit for a previous iteration of the project where the proponent was proposing 2 buildings, each with 5 units in them. So this is now 12 buildings for 12 complete units. And this is also the introduction of a reduced front yard setback. So the side yard setback that is included in this of the variance from 4.5 meters by 4 meters to 1.5 meters on both side yards is the same as what was previously approved. However, there is the addition of the front yard setback reduction by 1.4 meters to 6.1 meters. Yes, and then the development is otherwise very similar. There's some minor repositioning of where the septic field is that we're working with operations and the building department to ensure that that will work at the end of it. But they've all had a review and are comfortable with the project as proposed at this time.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that, Justin. Any questions, Council? Councillor Oakley, go ahead.
I guess my question just comes back to the infrastructure that is currently in the light industrial, you know, as things progress. What is your opinion on the infrastructure to be able to sustain any of this?
Yeah, I mean, we recognize that the road infrastructure is the most visible and obvious concern in that area. I believe council is waiting on a report back from staff on that area and the infrastructure and options for moving forward for repairs, upgrades, installation of below ground utilities and road repair, road reconstruction as well. I'm not sure if, I don't believe Chris is online tonight, but perhaps Shane or somebody can maybe provide a bit of an update on that. But I think that report is hope to have available soon. Obviously, part of our development permit review here is there's no concern with our ability or capacity to accommodate the proposal in the present time. But certainly any development that does go ahead will certainly only benefit from any infrastructure upgrades that do happen to the surrounding streets there.
Yeah, I think we're awaiting, and Shane, maybe you can confirm, but we're awaiting a report from ISL that was commissioned here a couple months ago. And what is the status of that report? Go ahead, grab the podium.
Yeah, we're currently working with ISL on that report. So we'll be looking at the water, sewer, and storm infrastructure as well as the road in that area, and looking at some options for cost sharing as per your request.
Yeah. Any idea when that's due back?
I believe it was a 2-month turnaround with the initial estimate. I believe we started that a few weeks ago. So we should be seeing at least the initial start or the initial drafts coming in soon. We can provide an update once we know more.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Oakley.
So I guess one of the things and it's a concern just of mine, and is things are happening so fast down there that I was just you know, a little bit concerned about not being able to having buildings, everything's new, people are planning to build there, and then all of a sudden we're, you know, behind on getting all of the infrastructure, and just would hate to see any problems resulting from that. It's, you know, we're doing it, the infrastructure renewal down there should have happened prior to all of this, obviously. So anyway, it's nice to see the development happening down there. It'll be really nice to see it improved, all the infrastructure done down there. It's obviously way overdue.
Yeah, absolutely. There are others that are looking at projects down there that are waiting for the outcome of our report to find out what the commitment from the city is, you know, prior to committing to the projects. So it's important that we get that report back. Thank you for those comments. Further, council? Go ahead, Councillor Dallin.
I think this will be excellent to have in place. The only concern that is readily available is the property to the east being a greenhouse may have some challenges with this. Otherwise, excellent to see it.
If I, just a brief comment, I don't recall speaking with her recently about this, but I know that the proponent next door there, certainly is aware of the project, was aware of the previous approved project, and that both projects were kind of in discussion and being proposed at the same time. So I think it's pretty clear to them what might happen next door there. But nonetheless, they will be notified as part of the process there if council gives direction to move ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further comments, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Excellent. Thanks for all that great information, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Ariel. And thank you, Troy. We'll see you later. Okay, next up under new business, we have under the category of new fire station base proposal and grant application request. And the motion on the floor is that council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the 5-year financial plan to include a grant-dependent capital expenditure of $2,098,444 to construct 3 new bays to support Fire Station 1 in the parking lot adjacent to City Hall. Let's just start with that motion. I don't see an and further here, so we'll do them one at a time. Go ahead, Scott.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, just finishing the rest of that resolution. It does carry on a bit about the offsetting grant revenue.
And the financial plan amendment to include offsetting grant revenue of a similar amount.
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
Mover, please. We need to get this on the table. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Seconder, Councillor Kiddo seconds. Okay, discussion. Chief, do you want to kind of give us the summary of where we're at?
So we were apprised of the potential or a grant opportunity that might support a project like this. Senior managers, we had some discussion around what might be closest to shovel ready that would benefit the community. There weren't many projects ready to go at this point in time. So this one actually was something that started out small, and with the changes in, supplies and materials and cost of labor increases really pushed it beyond our budget initially that we had for this. So we've gone back to the designing organization and asked them for revised budgets and what can we do here to help this project along to help fit this grant opportunity. So at this point in time, we can see that the costs are higher again. We put in a fairly large contingency. Whether we can maintain that through the grant approval process is yet to be seen. It is 100% grant fund or 100% funded for the project as far as that goes. The legacy costs are something that Jim could probably speak to at the end of the day or will speak to here. As far as operationally, it gives us the opportunity to bring a truck up here that we need up here, our ladder truck. If you go through the current fire hall and our situation in there is dire as far as room goes. We don't have office space. This allows us to move a couple of the staff into the office there, allowing for some other office use, near the fire hall for the city itself, for City Hall. Overall, we've looked at other things like parking impact. We haven't ironed that out entirely. We are looking at a change in flow of traffic on St. Mary. With that being said, we will probably lose a few spots of public parking along the way there. I think overall we looked at a net loss of 14, but that can be reduced a bit. We have done a bit of a poll as to who's using the lot out there, and it's typically the people using the pulp mill transit back and forth. It's not generally used by the public for anything other than that. With this occurring you know, it helps bring us into the modern age as far as our facilities go. It's not the ideal situation as far, you know, fire halls right now. You know, when you had mentioned Creston in the past, or it was brought up, Creston's fire hall started at 8 million, through the voter process, it was dropped to 6 million, and when it went out to bid, it turned into 13 million, and that was pre-COVID pricing. So, and that's not a big haul by any stretch of the imagination. If we were to go with a large fire station at this point in time, we're not sure where that would go. We're currently working on a long-term facilities plan for the fire department, this will be integrated in there. We've already spoken with the consultants on this. They have our plan. We've farmed it out so that there's a third kind of objective look at it from another company to give us, you know, some ideas. Obviously, we have our own kind of biases in our own plans, so we want to have it looked at from a third party perspective. That's due prior to the budget closing this year in September. So we would have some longer term for the overall facilities, our fire department facilities. We'd have a longer term plan for that. But this does fit in with that at the end of the day. You know, for us, we're trying to build capacity. We're trying to do it in an economic way. A grant being provided by the province really supports this project for us. So that's basically where I'm at with this.
All right.
So
Thanks,
are there
Chief.
questions about that, I guess?
Councillor McBain.
Thanks, Rick. I don't really have any questions, I think, but I do have some comments. I gotta say, as far as this grant goes, a little disappointed that this is what we're getting for our asks. We've got 2 proposals coming to us tonight. Given the breadth of what the grant covers and the dollar value associated with it. First of all, Rick, I appreciate you having something ready. That's great. You know, I think I'm struggling a little bit with some of the with a lot of things that we've been doing is what I would consider ad hoc design. You know, I know you make some points about the parking, you know, the guys from the pulp mill, and I would probably counter argue that the reason others don't park there is because these guys are parked there. But I'm really struggling, and I know it's not a fire hall issue, but with the grant, the fact that there was only just a couple of things ready to go when roads, bridges, a whole bunch of things were listed on here. So I guess this is just more of a comment in being a little bit more proactive and having some things ready to go. You know, the rink, for instance, I know there's work that needs to be done there, and I know we've put in grants in the past on that and been unsuccessful. But I mean, this is another chance to take for that, and yeah, it's kind of disappointing to me. So. Sorry, Rick, to steal a little bit of the thunder there, but.
No problem.
Further? Councillor Kittle.
Really appreciate the report, Rick, and also appreciate your attempts to be financially responsible around this. But I'm just really concerned that we'll spend $2 million, which will just kind of get us through for another year, a couple of years, but we're still going to be facing the same problems maybe 5 or 10 years down the track. Downtown's becoming increasingly congested. We're going to probably have space confines at City Hall. We'll probably need to expand there at some stage. I truly believe it's time for us to be looking at a modern, separate facility somewhere that's probably between Marysville and Kimberley. I'm also concerned about the growing needs for search and rescue. We've got a police building that's also about to expire, and that needs to be redeveloped at some stage as well. I think it's staring us in the face that we need an emergency services building at some stage in the near future here. I'm just concerned that spending $2 million on just to get us down the line is maybe just throwing good money after bad, and we might need to bite the bullet here in the near future. Thanks.
Councillor Oakley.
I agree with Councillor Quito. I think it's, when I read through this, I would rather see a long-range plan come forward. No matter how long that takes, and even though I know the deadline for this is in a couple of days, but I wonder, you know, I don't have a clear vision of how this would look, but I would like there to be a fairly thorough process to design emergency services, where the buildings will be, how this will look, how will we fund it, you know, when will it happen? That's all. I appreciate what you've done, but I definitely would rather, I'm going to not support this resolution tonight.
So just further to that, when the proposal came to us previously, if I remember correctly, 600,000 was on the table, but it ended up being a 1.2 million. If I remember the conversation around the council table, it wasn't about the money that came out of that. There was a request for, you know, if it's going to cost that much money to build a garage, basically, which is how it was positioned then, we need a comprehensive plan, a facilities plan for the fire department before, you know, making any decisions that were going to be in the millions of dollars. And we haven't seen that report yet.
Right. There are a couple of early results of the planning process. One of them is identifying where our model for the fire service fits best, in the location. The challenge is this is the location that we should have a fire hall, but we have a city hall here. There are factors that go into that. And one of the biggest ones is convergence of the volunteers that come in to our fire hall, and our residential density around here is where those people live. A central hall would actually slow down our response considerably. Like when we looked at it, it could be a 2 to 3 minute difference between having something, say, down near the McKim area or in that area. So we had plotted out different areas. So our long-term vision for this is to, you know, and I'm not sure what'll come from the recommendations as far as how to get a hall here. Our early plans, just looking at things and kind of, you know, the consultant we have works with other communities, and a combination kind of emergency services building is actually, it doubles your cost overall. So, but that does solve a problem, you know, if we have with RCMP or ambulance or whatever the case may be, but it does double your cost. You actually have to build 2 buildings and have them connected because RCMP requires certain security measures and other things. The other challenge is the costs are becoming very crazy. You know, fire halls that were on target for $13 and $17 million are now faced with $25 to $35 million. It's crazy what we're seeing right now. Vancouver Fire Rescue actually just built a station that they thought was 17 million, and it ended up, I think, at 36 million when it was done. One of the things that we've asked the consultant, what are the options that we could have, you know, if we were to do something here? It may include removal of City Hall and moving City Hall maybe to healthcare center or to up to the conference center. I don't know what the options are at this point in time, but we're throwing them around. The idea behind putting it where it is right now is it's the logical place for it that we can add on or build onto should things change at the end of the day. So those are our operational kind of considerations at this point in time. The economics of it are what they are. We're faced with who knows what it's going to cost to build, you know, in 2 to 3 years, let alone 5 to 10 years. We're a little bit concerned about the overall operations of the fire department. We need a solution. We see this as a longer term solution than a couple of years. We suspect this is 15 years to 20 years before we see a substantial change. A lot of that is due to the, you know, the overall cost of this. We do understand the city has some major costs coming ahead of them, right? You know, so we're trying to fit all of that together as a group and create something that we can manage. That's funded by a provincial grant that allows us to operate the way we want to operate. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, that report could very well just say this is where that fire hall should be anyways. So those are the things that we're faced with right now, and we've been working with them on this prior to throwing this, you know, putting this on the agenda today. So they're coming in for another site visit in another week or two. We've had a few meetings already. They've kind of diagnosed gone through our data. We've provided maps where everybody lives, where our responses are, and it keeps pointing back to this general area. So we don't own the other land around here. That's the other part of it. So
yeah. So what you're talking to, though, Rick, is exactly what I'm referring to as far as the strategic plan, a facilities plan. Those are elements of it. And I think it would be only fair to council that we have that, you know, in front of us, you know, as a comprehensive plan, as opposed to points that you're making for the grant. It
Yeah.
makes it look like the only reason this has come forward at this point in time isn't because it's the best solution. It's because there's a grant available.
Well, that is a factor in this, but it is part of the solution, the long-term solution as well. And that we've parsed out already. You know, the other parts of you know, we have to look at what are the construction. We don't have a design plan or what that would look like for something that's $25 to $35 million for this community yet. We have no idea. We do know that if we have bays such as this, we can tag onto that and create something out of it. This is like I said, it's a grant funded project. It's not something that, you know, is going to solve our 30-year problem, but it'll give us 15 years. And that's where we're going with it at the end of the day. So,
Scott.
Just to take a little pressure off of the chief, I am the one who ultimately checks with the department heads and makes the decision which grant we're going to work on and develop. It came down to a toss-up between something Parks and Rec related or the fire hall. We discussed the fire hall recently. The design had been relatively advanced, and I hadn't heard anything about a combination building. Ultimately, the time to apply for the grant is now. If council passes up on this opportunity, I mean, we could probably pull something out of the air and put a slab and boards grant in again for a third time. But we thought, why not try something different and try to maximize the return of money from Ottawa or Victoria back to our community. We've got a ladder truck parked down in Marysville doing us no good. We just had a great presentation from the planning department about building heights. Most of those buildings will be up at the resort or in the downtown core. We've just purchased a fire truck, which costs us an extra $200,000 to custom fit it for our tiny little Podunk Fire Department. No offense, Rick, but it's 50 years past its time. And you know, we make these decisions. We don't take them lightly. We also made the decision on the next agenda item to put together a rec master plan. So that will guide our decisions for future grant applications. But this is the application we're standing behind. There's 100 other things we could do. I won't disagree with that. But this one was the closest to being shovel ready, has a great chance of moving forward, and won't cost the taxpayers of Kimberley anything beyond what they've paid to the provincial government already. So that's why I support this application moving forward.
It actually is going to require a 1% increase in taxes to fund some increased operation costs that we'll have in addition to the replacement reserve.
Yeah, so would just about anything we would build with this grant.
Yeah, but it's going to cost the taxpayers some money.
Yeah,
So,
adding any asset will
We appreciate
cost the
that.
taxpayers money.
yeah, absolutely. Councillor Roberts, or sorry, Councillor Dallum, then Councillor Roberts. Sorry, Sandra.
Not to hold anyone's feet to the fire, I think that 6 million, I would have liked to seen that going towards the wastewater treatment plant as a potential grant application. I don't know if that's feasible. Pardon me?
I don't want to cut into,
No,
but I did ask Scott this question before, and I don't think it's stackable. I think that was part of the problem there. Because I had that same question, Kyle. Or Scott can probably elaborate on it some more too about.
Well, the problem is if you get a $6 million grant to build 6% of a $100 million wastewater treatment plant, and then you don't get the other grant, then you've sort of frittered away another chance
That's fair.
to catch up on our infrastructure.
For this particular project, something that I would like to have in the consideration is another floor. You know, if we're looking at something of this magnitude, you know, 2 offices, I don't know what other rooms maybe were involved or what, but if we had another floor that could be converted in future for a kitchen, barracks, something like that, that takes the useful life of the 60 years that's listed there and makes it more than a 15-year win for me.
Our 15 years would be, we're kind of trying to guesstimate at the density of the community and when we would have to shift to maybe more staff on a regular basis. And the idea is the back of the station is where we would be able to add that in. You know, based on where we're at in that report, and I don't want to speak out of turn on that, where that's coming to council. And there's actually two reports that they're working on. One is our modernization of the training center, as well as coming up with the long-term facility, and that's they're part and parcel right now. But where the report is considering the need to put a fire station here when the city needs it, like, you know, when we have the density and the population to support it, that there are other things that would have to happen for that, though. You know, we would look at, you know, what does City Hall look like? You know, this is the facility or the area that this should be in. So is this something that we start the discussion on? What does City Hall look like? And this is a cascading effect, obviously. When we look at, you know, the fact that if there were to build a fire station here, and let's just pick a round figure of $20 million, it's not just the 20 million for the fire station. It's what about this facility? Where does this go? So there's a lot that has to kind of come together. So it's not just the fire long-term plan that has to come together. They're working on a recreational long-term plan. We also have to look at the city facilities plan overall and see how all of that comes together. We're first in, you know, we're kind of first out of the gates on this. And I understand first one through the door gets shot. That's how it usually goes, right? So we totally, I get that. But for us, it's an operational win for us, low impact to the taxpayer. Jim can actually talk about the legacy costs that come up, and invite him up to discuss that as far as the 1% goes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Okay.
Councillor Roberts.
It would appear then that this purchase or decision is based on the grant.
100%. Yes,
So no grant, no base.
that's right. We'd still be pursuing something through the other process, but
I'm sitting here drawing pictures of myself of what it would look like on the upstairs of the hospital to have a city hall. So,
we got an elevator instead of the stairs. That's the good news.
anyway,
Yeah.
I have some concerns about operational concerns about how you move your vehicles in and out there, and the overhead lines and the I watched some of those trucks trying to back in to deliver at the AG Foods, and there's no room out there for things to go on. That
Right.
part bothers me a little bit as to the situation of it all.
Right.
Never mind the parking piece. I've always felt as though those people from the Crestburg and whatnot should be parking on that piece of property up by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, right.
But-
Well, we spent a lot of time working on the placement of the lot and making sure we have aprons in front of the station to be able to move the vehicles in and out and operate ladders, et cetera. We are looking at a traffic flow change, which would mean one way for the traffic coming from St. Mary's, and that would be, I believe, we were looking at coming
Go that
this way.
instead of
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, so and that would relieve a lane as well to get out. We see it as an operational win. Right now, you know, we have challenges getting out here, and we have challenges, especially at the back, getting the rigs out. And
Yeah.
so we're about even on those ones at that point.
So do these bays accommodate, well, obviously they're going to accommodate the ladder truck because
Yes.
you already bought it smaller.
Yeah. The idea is to get the ladder truck up here. That would be the ultimate, you know, win for us to have it here. The new rig that we've got coming would end up in Marysville, as we have to have a truck under 20 years in each station. So if we move the ladder truck up here, it would move that new truck down there where the bays would fit a bigger truck. But the other part of it is too, the bays aren't just barely big enough. They're big enough to facilitate future trucks that should be bigger as well.
When I was a little girl, the only television in Kimberley was downstairs in the fire hall, and my father was a fireman. So we started looking at that fire hall when I was 5, and that's 1950.
Yes.
So this is a really, really old building.
Yes, it is.
And whatever needs doing is going to take some doing.
That's right.
So, Chief, you know, in the absence of a report that we can dig our teeth into, you get the kind of questions that you're hearing around the table where counselors start to do engineering, engineering questions and studies, starting to design on the fly.
Yeah.
And we need, you know, we're the ones that are expected to make the decision on the money, and we need the data to do that. This report, I mean, that was, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever. I mean, we need a comprehensive report on where it's going feel comfortable that all the problems that we see and are in our mind are going to be resolved.
Right.
I'm just really disappointed we don't have that report in front of us at the time this.
I
decision's coming forward.
felt we could have got a draft to you, but it was again written by internally. And I believe that it probably wasn't credible at that point in that we did have a third party looking at it with other ideas, you know, and
Yeah, so,
think
yeah,
that's-
sure. I just, no comment required or
Right.
whatever. It's just that in order for us to make good decisions, we need good data.
Right.
Any further discussion, council? Go ahead, Councillor Oakley.
So just for clarity, barring this project, you know, even if we apply on it, it doesn't get funded. So ladder truck would stay in Marysville, new truck is going to fit in the bay here.
That's how it's
That
constructed, yes.
would be,
Yeah.
you know, the status quo.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My apologies. How long out are we before we're required for our next purchase?
As far as a new apparatus, you mean? I have to look at the chart. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was 2032.
Thank you.
So about 9 years, 10 years.
Councillor Kiddo, further?
Just to comment, Rick, I don't envy you at all. Like, I'm just looking at that development permit for down at Marysville, 4-story building, ladder truck.
Yeah.
Where you place that equipment is very difficult in a growing community with changing needs.
It is for sure. Our highest density and highest levels of building, if we go on the average, is up here or the ski hill.
The Alpine
And
area.
the new developments, we've been working with them, they're at the new code, sprinklers involved, and you know, that helps us feel better about things for sure. Yeah.
Okay, last call.
We do have Jim, if he wants to bring up any finances, if you want to talk.
The question didn't come up, so I think we're good. It was in the report. Kind of what was
You bet.
there. 100% covered capital cost and, you know, the operating. Okay, we'll call the question on the first motion associated with this, which was that staff prepare, council direct staff to prepare an amendment to the five-year financial plan. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. I think, so given that we're not going to do that, we probably don't have to deal with the other two motions, correct, Maurice? So I think, Rick, as everybody's indicated, it's a really tough position. But in order for us to make these magnitudes of decisions, we have to have that data in front of us. So how long can it be before, I appreciate that this particular grant app expires. It was the latest intake. There will be more coming. When do you think we can see a report? How soon? Because we see this as a priority too, believe me.
So we've asked him to have it ready by the end of September for us, so that it's part of our budget cycle for sure.
For next year.
For next year. Yeah.
Right, okay.
You bet.
Yeah, the sooner the better, for sure. Our job here is to support you, not to give you a hard time. But by the same token, it's our responsibility to get the right decisions made. So I'm sure you appreciate that. Go ahead, Councillor McBain.
Yeah, just further to that, I mean, I appreciate Rick having something we can look at least here. Like I said, my disappointment is, you know, I kind of wish there was a couple other, or there could have been some other things that we could have seen on here, not put you in this position. So I do appreciate at least having something that we could look at, so.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Scott.
I'd hate to see us miss out on a grant opportunity. You know, I don't think it would be out of order to, we do need a resolution to apply for a grant, but we could take a third attempt at a slab and boards application. It's certainly ready. We could have the numbers updated by Wednesday, but we would need a resolution to apply. I would say that was the second runner as far as
Right.
potential grant applications go.
Councillor McBain,
I would support that.
so moved.
So moved.
Okay.
Yeah, for the Civic Center, sorry.
Yeah. Did you have a comment on that? No. Okay, Councillor Goodwin seconds. Further discussion? All those in, oh, you were a little late there, Councillor Oakley. Go right ahead.
My comment on that would be, I do believe, you know, eventually the strategic plan will come forward for the fire hall. We'll eventually see that, and I'm confident it'll happen. Around the boards, the civic center issues, I think it's, you know, here we go, we're going to try it again. But my comment is this, that work, I mean, I know there's a strategic plan coming from Nicole, possibly, eventually, but I do think that that arena, that work has to be done. And even if it's not a grant that comes forward, if we're not successful. So my comment is, I think it has to be thought of as going forward, one way or another.
Councillor McBain?
Yeah, I would go further to that and just saying that it's something that we've been talking about for a while. We know it needs to be done. And if it's something that we can have done and it gets pulled out of the budget that we were going to pay for, that's a huge win for us. And then, you know, hopefully as things fall into place with the fire hall, we get a strategic plan. I don't think anybody around the table has any problem in spending more money on doing something that's long-term and will work for the city over the long haul. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Like I said, I appreciate Rick bringing this to the table as an opportunity. It's you know, that's great. But this is something that we can pick off hopefully right now. I think, you know, let's hope that we'll be successful. But it's something that needed to be done, and there shouldn't be any other taxpayer cost. It's a capital improvement. It's done.
So the other thing we do is we have a facilities assessment that's already been done on the Civic Center. And this was identified as a piece of work. I can't, midterm, Nicole? Anyway, it was slotted in as a piece of work that needs to get done in any event. So it's not like we're, you know, pulling something out of the air here. We have had the assessment. We know this needs to be done, and it fits with the grant application. So it makes sense. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess not to speak out of turn, I haven't spoken with Scott about this in terms of the grant application, but I think what we really need to do is look at the overall cost of that facility and the Marysville Arena. Both of those facilities are aging and have high numbers associated with replacement costs and elements to it. So I do believe it is a good application that should go forward, but I think we need to think bigger than just board and slabs, and we need to think of a redevelopment for ice recreation in the city of Kimberley. So again, some of the things that we have coming up this summer, building conditions assessments as they relate to the curling club, because I don't think we should forget about our neighbors to the Civic Center. There's some opportunity, I believe, by merging facilities together, we will have better operations for the community long term. So I would suggest if we're applying for this grant, we apply for the full $6 million and we build this into a full infrastructure project and renewal of the Civic Center.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, respectfully, that's not going to happen by Thursday, unless there's a plan we haven't seen yet. But certainly we can have that conversation. We just don't have a lot of time. So I guess council's writing us a blank grant application for up to $6 million for Civic Arena. And we'll have a look at the conditions assessment we have and put the best application we can forward by Thursday. And then next council meeting, we'll report back on what we applied for.
Awesome. Further? Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I was just going to say on some of that, I think Nicole, as we're working through, the more modular that we could get things, I mean, with the boards, I know we talked about that before. If there's, you know, most of those products now we can you could use at a different facilities. Just a suggestion to look into something like that. That doesn't have to be permanent. If you know, some miracle happens and we can get a brand new facility, we can actually use something from the old facility. So.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, boards and glass aren't what boards and glass used to be either. They typically are removable, which allows for a much more multi-purpose facility. There's all kinds of opportunities that will come from that. So I appreciate, Nicole, that it's a little bit on the micro side compared to, you know, the bigger picture, but it does fit with the bigger picture. So whatever can be done over the next couple of days can be done. Okay, last call or last word to Councillor Roberts.
I personally would support council or staff having a look at the opportunity to create the larger presentation and reporting back to us, knowing full well that we were prepared to go with the boards and glass if it doesn't turn out.
Yeah. All right, with that last comment then, thank you, Councillor Roberts. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. All right, don't sit down yet, Nicole. Next up, we have the Parks and Facilities Master Plan proposal to fit with the grant under capacity building. And the motion on the floor is that council directs staff to submit an application in the amount of $50,000 to increase the project cost for a grant to fund the $50,000 increase to the project cost if approved, and the council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the 5-year financial plan as outlined in the report. Councillor Kiddo moves and Councillor Dallum seconds. All right. Sorry about that long intro, Nicole. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. In front of you, you have a report seeking approval to apply for the Building Capacity Stream Grant. Essentially, what this will do will provide us with a long-term master plan for parks and facilities in the community of Kimberley. It'll provide council with directions and framework for decision-making. It'll help us with budget development, and it'll also prioritize what the community says to us. So typically when you complete a Parks and Facilities Master Plan, it involves engagement with the community to hear what the needs and wants are of the community. Since my time here, I've been here for just over a year now, I've recognized that our facilities are certainly aging, and they're a bit of a challenge when it comes to infrastructure costs for replacement moving forward. I also believe the community has changed immensely since those facilities were created. So I think we will hear feedback from the community that may not indicate the traditional Parks and Recreation is being spent, and we may be allocating dollars in other avenues. Those are just my early assumptions of being here in the community, but we're not just a hockey town anymore. So I believe there'll be that will be represented in the community engagement. It'll certainly prioritize our high infrastructure projects paired with the building conditions assessments that we'll be completing, which will help you guys prioritize for infrastructure needs moving forward.
Perfect.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Nicole. Councillor Dallum.
Just wondering, why not apply for the 75,000?
Project capacity is 50.
Oh.
The grant max is
It's the
$50,000.
maximum for capacity planning. is
My apologies. I was seeing the limit was 5 million and I was thrown off. So
No
thank you.
worries. Yep.
Yeah, slightly lower limit for the capacity planning. Yeah. Further, council? Right, seeing nothing further, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, don't go away. Third time up is the budget request for the Marysville Arena building condition assessment and the immediate recommendations that were put forth in that assessment. And the motion is that council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the 5-year financial plan. I guess I should just read this. It's there's several elements to it. My apologies. The council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the year one of the 5-year financial plan bylaw for consideration at a future meeting to increase capital expenditures related to the budget for the Marysville Arena Building Condition Assessment Immediate Recommendations Project by $18,807 from $37,300 to $56,107.44, with the identified funding source for the increase being the general operating capital reserve. So the budget has gone up. The increase is going to come out of the general reserve, and that is the motion on the table. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Dalla moves and Councillor Roberts seconds. All right, Nicole, can you parse that for us, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Essentially, what you have in front of you is a report requesting an increase of $18,807.44 to have works identified within the building conditions assessment completed at Marysville Arena. So within that report, we found a number of elements over the next 20 years slated for replacement. They identified immediate costs, some of which obviously involve the requirements for abatement for the identification of asbestos in the building. So in order to remove that, the request is there. Unfortunately, costs did come in higher than initially anticipated. I apologize for that.
So can you just speak to kind of the short-term requirement and why this is important?
As a part of the regulations of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, when a public facility recognizes and identifies asbestos within it, we need to take all measures needed to either repair or remediate limit the exposure. And in this instance, abatement is the recommended solution for that. So essentially, what has been identified is in the interiors masonry blocks of the washrooms. I'll remind you that this was an outdoor rink at one time. There's thought to believe, given the age of it, asbestos found within those blocks. So that's the cost of remediation.
And the assessment was the trigger.
Correct.
That we now know.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Kiddo.
I will not support this motion. We decided on the 5-year capital plan not to do any more investment into this building. I consider this report to be the last thing. The building's unsafe. I think it's time to condemn it and move forward and start making plans for what's to come next. To spend good money after bad on an aging facility that's at its end of its life just makes no sense whatsoever.
Councillor Dallin.
So I will vote in favor because regardless of what we do, we have to abate this material, even if we do terminate the building's function. And elemental mercury was listed as potential. I don't know, like, was it just asbestos as the insulation material, or was the other things just kind of examples?
They're examples.
Okay.
Yes.
Elemental mercury is no joke.
Councillor Oakley.
So I have always had my 10 years on council. I've always had trouble with this building. It is an old building, and what I do support is probably what's going to come from the master plan proposal for recreation. You know, I think it's going to suggest we start marching forward with facilities and planning for things that are going to be different. And my take is I'd much rather see another ice surface close by the Civic, if that's how it ends up, you know, that's brand new, and, you know, we can deal with Marysville Arena. It's very difficult. I just, in the 10 years I've been on council, I just feel like, you know, we put Band-Aids on that old building. The only thing that was done right, and I didn't support it at the time, was the refrigeration plant went outside, and that's portable. That can go to the Civic Center if you need to. Anyway, I'm gonna vote against this. I just I don't want any more money to go into that building. I'd much rather have that money go into something new and move forward. But we do have to wait for the planning document to come forward and what the recommendations are going to be from Nicole. So in the meantime, I'll just vote against this. I don't support money going into that building.
Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Goodwin.
Well, I'm going to support it for the short run because I believe that we have, we're going to, as Councillor Gallum says, even if you decide you want to sell that building, you're not going to sell it with that asbestos in it. You're going to have to abate it in order to get rid of it in the first place. The second thing is that there is a sort of an unspoken promise that when COVID was over, we would be opening that arena up. And I believe that closing it without an alternative measure is not in anybody's best interest. So if we get another season out of it because of this, then I would vote for it.
Councillor Good.
So if our Parks and Facilities Master Plan goes ahead, we get the funding, it's going to take a while to create, and then anything that comes out of that is going to take several years to build. If we decide we're going to have a new facility that combines all the facilities we currently have, we're probably looking 5 years down the road. We have an immediate problem with this. I will support the motion to spend this money right now, but I do look forward to doing some planning for the future.
Thanks, Councillor Goodwin. Further? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but we actually had this conversation a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. It was a while ago. And council at that time directed staff to get the quotes to go, which is what we're getting here, the quotes to actually get the work done. So, I think in following or in reinforcing Councillor Goodwin's comments, we need a second ice surface. I think it's proven we need the second ice surface, but the new one isn't going to be here for a while. As a result of that, we need to keep Marysville open for at least another season. I thought we had that conversation a few months ago, but perhaps not. Anything further? All right, hearing nothing, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Councillor Kiddo, Councillor Oakley are opposed. The motion is carried. Okay, next up is the replacement of the GIS system, our Geographic Information System. And this is for a grant application actually to replace the current GIS. And the motion is that council direct staff to develop and submit a grant application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program requesting 80% or $48,000 grant funding for the GIS system replacement project as described in the project manager's staff report. So let's deal with that one motion first. Councillor Roberts moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Go ahead, Shane.
Thank
Bring
you,
us
Ms.
into the world of geographic information systems.
Yes. Yeah, so as noted in the report, our legacy software is at the end of its life. This grant funding opportunity is available for up to 80% of projects up to $60,000. And the project would include the transition to new GIS software, more of an industry standard, as well as 1 year of the licensing for that software and the creation of the mapping interface. Please let me know if you have any questions on that.
All right, that was short and to the point. Thank you very much. Council. Go ahead, Council.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. As far as outputs that the public will be able to access / manipulate, will there be any, I guess, content, additional content that or will the interface be more user-friendly, improved, that type of thing?
Yeah, so like initially in this grant application, we would be looking to replicate what is there currently. So being able to see our public infrastructure, being able to see the property lines and some property information. And then once we have that solid base of a new GIS platform that is stable and easy to work on, we'll be working with the engineering staff and the planning department to expand that scope depending on what the community requires.
Further?
Yeah, sorry. I'm kind of a GIS nerd, so as far as metadata associated with that, are you guys trying to keep it fairly simple though, as far as what the public can access, or is the goal to expand it to the maximum allowable access?
Yeah, so I think initially it'll be pretty much just the bare bone. Make sure that we have the basics in place for the to support like the operations staff, the internal staff, as well as like the general public and the general like requirements of like a typical resident. And then as we build on that, we will be expanding. We gave the example of PG map there, where like you can see the different orthos through the years. So yeah, slowly expanding to provide more once we get a good baseline.
In the world of software, anytime you hear the term legacy system, it's never a
Yes.
good thing. It's old. Yeah, really old. Yeah. Further comments? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And we have one more motion here, and that is that council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the 5-year financial plan bylaw to include a non-capital expenditure of $60,000 in 2022 to undertake the grant-dependent GIS system replacement project as described in the project manager's report. With the offsetting funding source being grant funding of $48,000 and a reserve transfer of $12,000. And further, the council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the 5-year financial plan bylaw to increase operating expenditures in 2023 and each year thereafter by the amount sufficient to fund the annual subscription fees associated with the grant-dependent GIS system replacement. Yeah. Mover, please. Councillor Goodwin, thank you. And Councillor Kiddo seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Sooner the better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. Next up, we have the RDK Community Works Fund grant that is being given on behalf of the Kimberley Gymnastics Club Fire Recovery Project. And the motion on the floor is the council authorize the mayor and chief admin officer to execute the funding agreement attached to this CFO's report dated June the 27th, which establishes the terms and conditions for that grant. Councillor Dallum moves and Councillor Kiddo seconds. Discussion. Anything, Jim, did you want to make a comment?
Just provide a brief overview.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
So as council's aware, with the loss of the gymnastics club in December last year, the RDEK generously passed a resolution to provide $50,000 to the city to help with the expansion of that facility to make it more suitable for the club, allow them to hold tournaments and that type of thing. So basically, just as it indicates in the resolution there, this is just a formalization of that commitment by the RDEK. Outlines the terms and conditions for the receipt of the $50,000, with the primary one being that that money is used for the expansion of that facility, kind of beyond its original size and scale. And if we don't spend all the $50,000 on that, they just want the rest back.
All right. Council, questions? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next up, we have the annual report, and the motion is that council approve the 2021 City of Kimberley annual report as attached to the report from the corporate officer dated the 27th of June, and that council directs staff to submit the annual report to the Government Finance Officers Association for review under the Canadian Award for Financial Reporting Program. Councillor Roberts moves, and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. Somebody want to speak to this briefly? It's pretty straightforward, I know, but time to blow the horn a little bit here.
It's part of our statutory requirement that we have to meet by June 30th, so we're close to the deadline. We submitted the annual report for community comments, and we have not received anything. There's been only one change made since it was the draft was presented to council related to the I can't remember
The greenhouse gas emission baseline from 2007, I believe.
2007.
Yeah.
So, and we are pretty confident that we are meeting the requirements for the the award, because it's going to be our 4th year applying for it. So,
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. The annual report is outstanding. That's why you didn't get any feedback from the public. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Item 7 under new business is the 2021 Statement of Financial Information, better known as the SOFI report. And the motion is the council approve the 2021 Statement of Financial Information in the form attached to the CFO's report dated June 27th. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Kiddo seconds. Everybody have a chance to review it. Your names are in there on the public record. We have to be one of the lowest expense spending municipalities in the entire province. It's we are very discretionary when it comes to our spending. All right, call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Item number 8 under new business is the 2022 UBCM convention attendee authorization. The conference this year is in Whistler. In the past, we really haven't sent anybody, myself included, to Whistler, primarily because it's harder to get to. It adds a couple of, I think, depending on all things being equal, 2 days travel time. It's just very difficult to get to. And certainly not all of the provincial staff members all go to Whistler, for that particular AGM. However, this year, given that we have been out of commission for the last couple of years, getting back to the first one back happens to be in Whistler, but I think it's important to attend this year. So the motion on the floor is that myself and any councillor who is willing and wanting to go to UBCM be authorized to do so. Councillor Roberts, you would like to attend?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm willing to attend.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else without day jobs? Okay, the motion on the floor is that Mayor McCormick and Councillor Roberts be authorized to attend the UBCM convention. Councillor Kiddo moves, thank you. Councillor McBain seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. At UBCM, we have the Municipal Insurance Association AGM, and our municipality is a voting delegate, and we need to appoint myself as the voting delegate to the MIA AGM. So moved, Councillor Goodwin and Councillor Roberts seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, next up, item number 10 under new business is the RCMP 2023-2024 approval in principle. And the motion is that council direct the CAO to send the RCMP a letter of approval in principle establishing the contract strength of the Kimberley Municipal Police Unit at 8 full-time equivalent RCMP members for their 23-24 fiscal year, and the council direct administration and the RCMP NCO in charge of member transfers and leaves such that the budgetary outcome for the fiscal year is equivalent to 7 full-time equivalent RCMP members. So we have capacity for 8, we budget for 7. Councillor Dowland moves, Councillor Goodwin seconds. Discussion. I think it's pretty much as simple as that, right, Jim? Scott? Anything to add? All right, call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, item number 11 under new business is the notice of motion from Councillor Kiddo to reopen council meetings to in-person attendance. Nigel, did you want to? Sure. If you would, it is your motion, so please.
There you go. So whereas council meetings have been closed in person to public access since the beginning of the COVID-19 health emergency. And whereas the Provincial Health Officer Order on Gathering and Events permits in-person public attendance at council meetings, therefore be it resolved that public access to council chambers be resumed for the regular meeting of July 18th, 2022 on a first come, first served basis.
Councillor McBain moves, or sorry, seconds that motion. Thank you. Discussion. So first come, first serve. Scott or Maurice, yeah, go ahead.
Capacity in this room has been established now at 25 persons. And so the 26th person will have to vacate. We rarely have more than 2 or 3 folks in the gallery, but with the election upcoming, it might be educational for people to attend in person. But we have to do a little bit more arranging in council chambers. We do want to keep the 2-meter distancing up as long as we can, but it's time to reopen.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that, Scott. And thanks for the motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And last item under new business is the check run in the amount of $660,354.66. Mover, please. Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Roberts seconds. Anything to note beyond routine?
Well, beyond routine at this point is a lot of expense for what's taking place on the Boundary Road area, pipes and heavy equipment and so on.
Okay, awesome. Which is technically routine. Okay, hearing nothing further, call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, that concludes new business. We move on to a couple of items of correspondence. The first is the email from Tim White regarding primary healthcare providers. Could we have a move to receipt? Councillor Dallum, thank you. And Councillor Kiddo seconds. Comments? Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I would like to just provide a comment from the email of Tim White. Just to remind Kimberley residents that it is difficult. We do have a lot of people who live in Kimberley who don't have a regular family doctor, but we are lucky in the regards that if you are a permanent Kimberley resident and you need to see a doctor on the day, you can see the doctor on call up at the health centre. Now, capacity is very, very limited. We know that that's a problem, but we're hoping as the primary care networks get going throughout British Columbia, that's going to increase capacity, potentially expand hours at the health centre as well. So we're not living in a perfect situation. This is a problem that's facing most of Canada and most of the Western world, but I just feel like in Kimberley, we're escaping the worst of it because we've got a great group of family doctors who choose to live here just like we do. And hopefully we can just keep them here and keep up the good work.
Yeah,
Thanks.
excellent. Thanks for those comments. So, so if there is an emergency and somebody needs to get to a doctor, there is an on-call doctor at the clinic that they just call ahead and say, need to see a doctor today. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thanks, Nigel. Further comment? All those in favor of receipt? That motion is carried. And then lastly, we have a letter from Carla Shalley, which was received on June 19th regarding a letter of support for pet care services. This is, if there's a deja vu, it's because last meeting we did deal with a letter from Carla, and she has, as you have probably seen, resent. Councillor Goodwin?
Motion to receive.
Seconded by Councillor Dallum. Comments? Councillor Oakley?
So I'm still finding it confusing because she's requesting a letter, or she's requesting a letter saying that we support this type of venture. And I'm not sure exactly what the venture is still. I don't know. I think I'll support receiving this, but I think if Carla wants to come in a future meeting as a delegation to talk a little bit more about this, that might be the way forward.
Yeah, the letter of support is, she plans on taking it to tech. She's looking for basically space Maybe Scott, you can just give us the,
Yeah, I spoke with Miss Shally after her last letter was received and just gave her the advice that it was a bit lengthy and maybe to put the ask in a shorter letter. So she is seeking a letter of support to present tech. To present to tech, basically to carve out some space for her dog rescue and other associated dog services, which were outlined in the previous letter. But she does live in PEI, so she won't be coming in person. But she would love to move back to Kimberley, and this is her goal, is to support dog owners and help foster dogs and rehabilitate them in a space either within or near Kimberley. But probably her best bet in Kimberley is to work with tech.
go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I really understand the ask, and it's something that we probably really need in Kimberley, but without knowing what, when, how, and any of the details, I couldn't give a letter of support without any more details.
This is kind of an unusual request for this type of letter of support in any event. And I mean, what we're talking about here is any entrepreneur wanting to come to the city to start a business could come to the city and ask for a letter of support and say, you know, and then take that wherever it is they're going to go. And I'm not sure that, you know, that's in our, you know, that is in our wheelhouse to provide blank or open letters of support like that. Go ahead, Ken.
I would just say that if she does establish a nonprofit here in Kimberley, we have a procedure and a policy to support nonprofits. And so if then an application came for funding, we'd certainly look at it like all the others. But I don't know her, and I don't, you know, it's getting a letter of support blind like this. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, we do have an in-camera this evening. Pardon me, but before we get to that, we would open up the phone lines. Are you ready, Maurice? For a question period, which is where members of the public can call in and ask questions about anything that was contained in the meeting this evening. And members of the public can call 800-741-7180. And when prompted, the meeting number is 2485-652-6624. And we will be happy to entertain your questions. So while we're waiting to see if we have any calls, we'll go through councillor items on kind of activities or things within your purviews that have happened in the past 2 weeks. Councillor Goodwin.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Oakley.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I was scheduled to be at the library committee meeting on Thursday, but I was burning back from Kelowna and I missed it by about 45 minutes, but I did get an update from Greg Bradley and some good news. The collective bargaining agreement has been completed, so that the workers there and staff are under the Steelworkers Union. That was I think it was completed on June 1st, so that's great. 2021 audit was also completed, so that's also good news. And then, yeah, some of the grants that they've been looking for had come through, some decent amounts of money for some upgrades within the library building. And then lastly, they expect to put out a posting for the new director within next couple of weeks, month or so. So yeah, things are moving along, so that's good.
Positive.
And then I don't know if Sandra was going to mention it, but I have to give a little bit of a shout out to my dad now, who's going to be doing who's going to be joining Bill Roberts in the mine tours up there, running the drill for all to see. So he's really excited about that. So please give him a hard time if you go up there, and you can tell him it was directly from me.
Thank you, Councillor McBain.
That would be Minor Dale.
Follow up. Councillor Roberts, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I had an opportunity to meet with the Nature Park Committee recently, and it was a really interesting kind of sedate meeting. Some folks have been dropping out, and other people are kind of wondering what the heck are we doing here. And we kind of had a long kind of discussion about why that was. And there is this belief that the nature park is getting lost in all of the activities that take place around the park, the activities that are around the mountain, the activities that are the rails to trails, the activities that are the Trails Society, and the nature park is kind of fighting for its own identity and its own existence. So I'm going to be facilitating a meeting with them in early July so that we can come up with a bit of a PR plan as to how we're going to put the nature park in front and center for people to recognize what it is and why it still exists and why they should participate in it. And hopefully we'll be looking for some grant funding as to be able to provide some postings of posters and kiosk type things, or somebody at markets to sell the nature park back to people who seem to have sort of forgotten it. So more to come on that.
Go ahead, Councillor Oakley.
Just a quick comment to Councillor Roberts. If when you have that meeting, if you could let me know, I'd love to participate in that. Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you. Councillor Kittle.
Sorry, Sandra, I just have the comment. The nature park, that's the solace amongst all that craziness that's going on. That's what we try, but the PR piece is excellent, so that's great. I will mention Grad, but I'm going to leave that to you, Mr. Mayor, because your address was excellent. Thank you very much. We had a Tourism Kimberley meeting just after the last council meeting. Probably the big news was the success of the new website. Visitations up quite significantly for this time last year, like, over 140%. 6,000 hits for the month, and more impressive, I think, to that is the bounce rates dropped quite dramatically, and the visitations are getting longer. And still the primary visitations are coming from Calgary and Vancouver, and then really spread out after that. Some other things we talked about was we're getting a student via the CBT program for the visitor centre over the summer. There's a collaborative going on for Kootenay Arts with Nelson, Castlegar and Fernie. I've been working on the photography assets, new video for the Electrify the Mountain project, also involved in the Ale Trail passport campaign, and working on a new ambassador program with the College of the Rockies. So lots going on.
Yeah, outstanding.
Oh, and the last thing I should mention is we've agreed to allocate budget to some TELUS analytics to give us some more data about who's coming, how long they're staying, where they're, what's going on, some more objective data there. So yeah, lots going on. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Nigel. Go ahead, Kyle.
So, you said it best. There is a lot going on. The regional district has donated $5,000 towards First Saturdays. Round the Mountain now has happened, not just my friend's trial run that tripped me up last time we spoke. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind couple of weeks. Some people saw in the paper that there were some veterans. We had a ceremony at the park that was strictly some veterans that had missed us over COVID and really wanted to come for a visit. So we had a ceremony and a supper, and that was excellent. The unofficial stuff, it's just endless, the amount of stuff going on. I mean, I haven't, the only time I've sat down is to drive my truck. It's been really busy and overall quite exceptional. Obviously, everyone knows the challenge we've had lately was the theft of some plaques, and the most common conception of what that was likely because of was for the idea that they might have been brass and worth $2 a pound for scrap, which they're not. They're worth pennies on the pound for scrap, although priceless for their purpose. Unfortunately, other areas of the city seem to have also been affected with this. So we know it wasn't targeted against veterans specifically in any way. And on the brightest side of this, the unity within this community has been just incredible. The amount that people have really come together and just shown what community is, you know, that's been incredibly admirable. And I want to say thank you to everybody for that. You know, there was a time when we weren't really sure what kind of an effect we were even having because of how quiet everyone is when you're doing well. And then we hit this this bump in the road, and the roar, absolutely deafening. So that's the bright side. I'm really thankful for that.
So events are, beg your pardon. Events are definitely, I'll reinforce the back with a vengeance. So it's been an incredible couple of weeks. So I will make reference to the grad ceremony that happened a week ago Saturday. There were over 100 grads this year at Selkirk, which is the highest number of grads that have come out in a while. It's usually been about 60 or 65. The bubble is now working its way through the system. It was an incredible event held at the Civic Center again this year. There was a bit of a pivot. Our stage basically had to be thrown away, so the school had to do a bit of a pivot on how they set things up. And quite honestly, the setup this year was spectacular. I think it was 100% better than what had been done in the past. So it was an amazing ceremony. The energy in the building, both from the grads and from the parents and grandparents and everybody else, the friends and family, was absolutely amazing. It was truly a privilege for me to be there. The scholarships, I will make point. Now, there were two numbers that were thrown out, the numbers of scholarships. Both of them were amazing. The first was that there were $60,000+ in scholarships given out to the students. Later on, I heard a number of 80,000 thrown out. I'm not sure which one it is, but whichever one it is, it was an awful lot of support for Selkirk and for the community that we have here in helping these kids move on to what their next thing in life is going to be. Anyway, I can't say enough about it. It was pretty awesome. And congrats to Christopher for jumping into the deep end now. Yeah, that's awesome. So. Yeah. The farmers market opened. I had the privilege of opening up the market again this year. There was no goat. No, there was no goat this year. And there was no bugle. Thankfully, I couldn't blow the bugle anyway. So we had to innovate a little bit this year, and we ended up starting the market off with the ding ding of a bike bell. It was innovation on the spot, Kimberley's finest. Anyway, the farmers markets are now open, and it's good to have them back. I was also, my wife Bev and I were in the Sam Steele Parade again last weekend. We get invited every year to represent Kimberley. It was pretty awesome. I got to tell you, the attendance at that parade was phenomenal. From the beginning to the very end, people were packed at the thinnest, 2 and 3 deep, and at the thickest, they were taking up the entire sidewalk. It was really nice to see everybody back in the parade. Round the Mountain happened, as Kyle mentioned, this year. I think there were close to 500 entrants again this year, which is pretty much capacity for Round the Mountain. It was an amazing day. I had the opportunity to volunteer at the timing tent at the end for the trek. And to my knowledge, I didn't screw anything up with the iPad and kind of punching the times in. A lot of fun was had by everybody who was up there. The Masons, the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon, have held their 150th annual communication here in Kimberley at the conference center this past week. Well, not just the weekend, it was Thursday night. They had a reception up outside the Stemwinder, and then on Friday and Saturday had their conference at the conference center. 300 Masons from all across the province were in. You might have noticed if you were in the Platzl on Saturday, the guys in the dark suits. Yeah, this was the Masons. It was awesome to have them in town. I also had the opportunity to say some opening words at the Kimberley Pride Day on Saturday. It was the sun was shining, and it was a small but enthusiastic crowd that was there, and it was a privilege to be able to make some opening comments. In addition, this is it's not directly linked, to the city of Kimberley, but the Meadowbrook Community Association was celebrating its 10th anniversary this past week, and in particular, almost to the day, the 6th anniversary of the dedication of the provincial park at Cherry Creek Falls, and so I had an opportunity with Bev to go out, and that's an awesome spot out there for anybody who hasn't been out there. It's one of those things that's probably going to sit on the tourism. When you're in Kimberley, things to do. Heading out to Cherry Creek to those falls is definitely worth a trip out there. Scott and I had our semi-annual meeting with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Seems like a long time ago now, but it was only a couple of weeks. It was less than 2 weeks ago. We meet with the regional manager and the folks responsible for Kimberley and talk about the things that are on the list to make sure that they continue to be put forward. Things like crosswalks at the various pieces, at the various intersections along the highway. I continue to talk about a passing lane down on Elk Flats between here and Cranbrook as the numbers of cars go up. We are going to get a permanent counter on that highway so that we can keep track of the number of trips per day. But the latest counts show north of 7,000 trips a day going back and forth between Kimberley and Cranbrook. We also talked about St. Mary Lake Road. Scott and I are lobbying as much as we can to get them to take up responsibility for that piece of road that we have responsibility for. They haven't said no. They're not very enthusiastic about it, but they haven't said no. So we're going to continue to push for that. And we also talked briefly about the Forest Crown access and how much more development needs to happen up there before changes need to be made to that intersection. So it was, I think, a positive. Anything else to add on that? Yeah, it was a pretty positive meeting. And I've also been making my rounds with the dozen or so developers that we have with projects either underway or on the books here. I really worry about the increasing interest rate, the interest rates going up, and also the continuing inflation on construction costs. The combination of those two things could stop any of the projects that we have underway. So I just want to make sure that we're in touch with the developers and making sure that we get a heads up if in fact, anything is changing. So yeah, there were a number of those this week as well. It was a busy week, 2 weeks actually. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I thought it was pretty cool last night. Just he's a Cranbrook kid, but congratulations to Bowen Byram for winning the Stanley Cup last night. Really hard thing to do as a 21-year-old, just getting to the NHL and being able to win that trophy is pretty cool. So exciting for him. He's a Cranbrook kid, but it's still East Kootenay. So well done.
Yeah, outstanding. In fact, it wasn't that he was just there. He had an impact, a very significant impact in the series. Yeah. Okay, Maurice.
No caller, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you for that. So we do have an in camera, so I need a motion to move in camera. Councillor Oakley, thank you. And Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, thanks folks for listening in, and thank you staff for being here. We appreciate all your hard work.